Right. So the best place for us to begin is to understand the classical version of a hypnotherapy session. Who of us have been to a therapy session before? Okay, so about half of us. Excellent. So the reason this is important is because I want to give you the classical version and then contrast the way that I do things to show you an easier version to get the same results. What tends to happen with hypnotherapy, when NLP was introduced, when life coaching was introduced, it got so muddied and confusing that we spent last year teaching 3,500 students who all had the same thing, all had the same issue. They would come to us and say, I've got all the skills, I've done every course you can imagine, Scott, but I still don't know what to do. Who's done a training before and had that experience? It makes sense why you do it, but as soon as you sit in front of a client, what happens? Mind goes blank, and it did for me too. So I want to give you the classical version, then give you a contrast, plus give you some analogies to play with that'll make things easier for you. So by the end of the 3 days, you'll probably be hypnotizing the person next to you and giving them a therapeutic release, if you will. So that's a nice thing to look forward to. So I'll give you the idea of a classical version that for some of you might recognize. So this is classical, okay, therapy in the context of hypnosis. So usually the therapist will start with their intake form. They'll ask some questions, get them comfortable, we'll call these rapport, hopefully get paid at the start as well, work out all the boring stuff. Okay? And then they'll move into something that's known as a pre-talk. Who's heard of a pre-talk before? Okay? So a pre-talk is important. What a pre-talk does and should do is set the foundations for what's about to occur. So the idea of a pre-talk is to let a client know what's going to happen, what it might feel like, what they might experience, maybe give them some idea of what hypnosis is. You'd be very surprised. Sometimes your clients will book you in and have no idea what hypnosis is, so you might need to explain it to them. Okay? Now this can consist of many, many things, but a lot of those things become superfluous to the session that we're about to do, and it wastes a lot of time. Okay? The next step after the pre-talk is what's known as the induction. The induction, ideally, is when a therapist uses certain techniques, strategies, language patterns in order to close off one part of the mind. When we're working with hypnosis, we're dealing with two parts. I'll refer to them as the conscious mind and the unconscious. If you prefer subconscious, that's fine, but it is the unconscious. Okay? Two parts we're going to work with. So basically what an induction does is close off, which part of the mind do you think? Conscious. What I would like you to do in your groups, if you can get into groups of 3 or 4, I would like you to write down everything that the conscious mind does and doesn't do. Who has that voice inside their head that just doubts everything you can do in life? Says you can't do that, or that'll be hard. He'll never do that, she'll never say that. Who has that? Who's heard that part of their mind before? This is your conscious mind. Okay, so I'll give you the first one. It confuses reality. Reality you want, it confuses things. Okay, it makes things harder than what they should be. So what I'd like you to do in your group is write down as many things as what the conscious mind does and why we as a hypnotist need to get rid of it. Why is it so important? Okay? Do you guys want another example of what the conscious mind might do? Anyone have an idea of what the conscious mind's there for?
Protect.
Yep, definitely to protect. So there's some sort of protection. What else? What was that, sorry?
It's very logical.
Very logical. Over-logical.
Decision making?
Yes, excellent. Get in your groups, guys. Write these down. Okay? Let's get in little circles if you guys want to... What is the conscious mind responsible for? What's its function?
Lots.
Definitely lots. Probably too much. What do we think? It's definitely logical. Definitely protects us. Definitely confuses things. What else does it do? Can be good and bad. It's got its good points too.
The judge?
Yeah, definitely judging. Yep. Thinking, yes. Bit of both, but yes, definitely part of your thinking.
Attention.
Definitely attention. What could it do that could negatively impact us as a hypnotist when working with a client's conscious mind? What could it do? Resisting. Has anyone come across a really resistant client before? Not even a client. Who's come across somebody in general that resists everything you say to them, everything you do for them? Yeah.
Children.
Yeah. Definitely. So it's very resisting. Why? Because it's there to protect. It's there to filter out all the information that's out there and all the rubbish we get told to on a day-to-day basis. Because you didn't, it would overload you and you'd never be able to leave your house. Okay? The world would be a dangerous place.
What about learning?
Yeah, definitely. When you learn, it actually starts conscious, goes unconscious, gets better, and then you learn it consciously again, it gets even better. So it does have its place. The conscious mind has its place in some of the things the unconscious might do, and vice versa. So I think it's important. We'll put it up there. That'll come down to the attention as well. Come down to that as well. Okay? So as a hypnotist, the only reason we use an induction, regardless of... Does everyone know what I mean by an induction? Okay, we're going to go through a few. So what an induction does, just to use a metaphor, it slows down the conscious thinking so the unconscious mind can express itself. Think of the conscious mind, think of the mind like a jar. The conscious mind is the lid. If you wanted what the content inside the jar, what would you have to do? Take the lid off, pour it out, put your hand in there and grab it. Think of the mind like that, just for this 3 days. The conscious mind is the lid. We need to take the lid off. The way we do that is by using an induction. It slows it down, it puts it to sleep, takes it offline, takes the lid off. Whatever metaphor helps you to understand that. Where we get lost as a hypnotist is this. We try and find the best induction. What is the ultimate induction? If you do enough Google research, you'll find them all. They have some really nice names too. The 10 steps to out-hypnotize everybody. Use these 3 questions that'll have total mind control of everyone you speak to. Run if you see those, because they do not exist. Your inductions do only one thing. Conscious mind stops it. That's it. It's the only thing it does. Regardless whether it's 1 step, 5 steps, 10 steps, 15 steps. If you break down even the most advanced inductions, and there's heaps in the hypnosis industry, they all do the same thing. They just stop conscious thinking. Okay? And we'll learn how to do that. Let's go back to the timeline of a hypnotherapy session, The induction. After this, generally, the hypnotist will do what's known as a deepener. Okay? Now what this supposes, and the premise they're playing with, is that the deeper a client goes into hypnosis through certain means, the better effect therapy will have. Okay? Who's heard something similar to that before? Okay? For this 3 days, please put that idea aside. Okay? Depth has nothing to do with the results of a client. Some clients will go really, really deep. For those that have been around us long enough, you've seen some very bizarre demos up the front. But we've also seen demos that I've just been talking to someone, their eyes don't even close, it doesn't even look like they're in trance, but they have a big therapeutic release. So it's a very shallow trance. So it's often trained in the industry that we're supposed to deal with different types of brain waves. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work, okay? The induction only does one thing, remember. It takes down the conscious mind. Your client will go as deep as they need according to what they need at the time. There's nothing else we need to do. It's not saying deepeners are incorrect, but again, we waste a lot of time doing things we don't need to do, okay? So for just the 3 days, let's just play with we don't need a deepener. We're just going to continue on in suit, okay? So after the deepener is done, the therapist will do what they get paid for, which is therapy. Okay? They might tell a story. They might use some imagery. They might confuse the living daylights out of their client. They might ask their client to think or imagine things. They might sit their client in total silence and just say, work it out for yourself. There's many different ways to do therapy, but that's where you get paid. That's why clients come to see you. After the therapy is done, there's an end trance, so they bring them out of trance. There's usually what's known as testing, okay, or future pacing. So your client comes out feeling amazing, and you let them know that the rest of their life's going to be amazing just like this, and they should hopefully connect to the remainder of their life. Okay? So for those who've been in a hypnotherapy session or done another training before, does that look fairly obvious to you? That's the timeline of a classical hypnotherapy session. We're going to stick to it, but I'm going to make it easier for you. Okay? So All of this will still have its place. We're just going to change the acronym to suit more of a conversational feel. Okay? So our goal over this 3 days is to learn several of these and different types of therapy. Makes sense? We'll use some language-based ones and bits and pieces, so you can get an all-round skill that allows you to be flexible with clients. The one big mistake we all do as hypnotists, and especially in the industry we have now, is we're taught only one way to do it, which is scripts for the majority of the time. But if that doesn't work, you're left sitting in front of your client going, well, what do I do now? This script didn't work. I've been preparing it for 2 hours. What do I do? It hasn't worked. So I want us to put that aside and learn how to do this in more of a conversational feel, so you never have to prepare yourself again. For those who have seen clients before, you'd probably admit that preparing for the session actually takes longer than actually doing the session. I'd rather you just sit back, relax, watch another show of Oprah before your client comes in and have some fun with it. So does that make sense to everyone so far? So let's look at the conversational hypnosis version. So this is the timeline we're going to play with. And like I said, the more content we can get out for this, even better. This is just my formula that I play with. It's known as the PHITTR Formula. This will give you the timeline from start to finish, just like the start from the pre-talk all the way up till testing. Okay? So let's break this down and spend the rest of our time learning how to do it. So this P stands for priming. Priming is just a better word for pre-talk. Okay. The H stands for the hypnotic interview. That's when we're going to find out what's really going on inside of a client's head, find out what's their problem and how we can help them. The I, as the same as the classical version, is our induction. Okay, we're going to close the conscious minds, allow the unconscious mind to express itself. The T stands for therapy, just like the other timeline. Okay. This T stands for testing, and the R stands for repeat if necessary. The great thing about this formula, and why it helped me so much, is it can be adjusted to suit a smoker, weight loss, anxiety, scared of green chickens, monsters under the bed, whatever your client comes in to see you for, this formula fits exact. The reason why is because it is so flexible. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. Who would rather do this version that depicts you have to follow these steps, or who would rather do this where it's just flexible and you can just try something and then go back to it over and over again? A lot easier this side. The easier it is for you as a therapist, the better the results will be. Why? Because you're no longer anxious. You're no longer scared about treating clients. It becomes a way you think and a way you feel as a hypnotist. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. Any questions just on that? No, you don't know how to do it yet, but that's where we're headed. Any questions on either of those? No, pretty straightforward. Okay. So I'll keep using this board. We're going to break this down and play with exercises accordingly. So, who has had someone try to hypnotize them before and it didn't work? Okay, yeah, sort of. Who has been hypnotized before and had an experience of it? Okay, believe it or not, there's only 4 steps. I'll give you 3, but I'll give you the bonus 4. 3 steps that it takes to actually create what is called a hypnotic trance, regardless of the person, regardless of their personality, regardless if you're under the assumption that the smarter the person is, the easier they are to be hypnotized, or the less intelligent, the easier. Those myths are out the window. There's 3 steps, I'll give you the bonus 4 as well, that everyone has to go through, whether they know it or not, to be quote-unquote hypnotized. Okay, I'll put this down here. Who's heard of the ABS formula before? Okay, just a few of us, probably the returning students. Okay. This ABS, or these 3 steps, is what it takes for you to be hypnotized. This ABS formula exists in every one of these steps. So this is what it takes to be hypnotized. This is the timeline of a hypnotherapy session. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's look at the A first off. The A stands for attention. We need undivided attention from our clients in order for them to experience a hypnotic trance. Would anyone hazard a guess as to why attention might be so important? You're definitely there for them. What else?
Give their conscious mind something to do.
Perfect. Give their conscious mind something to do. Before you can take the lid off, what do you need to do? Put your hand on it and twist. You need to make eye contact with it so you know where to put your hands. Attention gives the conscious mind something to do, and believe it or not, attention fuels a trance. Okay? If you don't have enough fuel in your car and you're driving, what happens? The car stops. If you don't have enough attention throughout your entire interaction as a hypnotist, the trance will stop and your client will come out premature. Does that make sense? Okay. The B. I'll give you A here. B here. Bypass the conscious mind. Bypass the conscious mind. Okay. This is your induction. This is where your induction is. Okay. The S stands for stimulate. The unconscious mind. That's where your therapy comes in. If all you did by the end of this 3 days was just understand those 3 steps, you will be doing more than most hypnotists out there. I can guarantee that. Okay? When you understand that in order to bypass the conscious mind, all you need is any induction, no matter how many you have in your suitcase of inductions, they all do the same thing, you're ahead of the bunch. If you realize that in order to do any therapy, whether it's a snake phobia, spider phobia, scared of water, anxiety, confidence, weight loss, in order to do therapy, all you need to do is stimulate the unconscious mind and just interact with it and play with it like you would do a child. You'll get a therapeutic response every single time. Sounds too easy, right? Okay.
Can you define for me what you mean by a therapeutic response?
Yes, so a therapeutic response or a therapeutic release, client comes in with an issue, leaves without it. That's what I mean.
So you're assuming it's a positive outcome?
Hope so, yes. Or, and I will add to this, not necessarily does it have to be positive, as long as it's something different than what they came in with. I'll give you that in a bit more context. So say a client comes in, needs to quit smoking, and they started smoking 40 a day. But after leaving your office, a couple of days later, they're only smoking 2 a day. They've still got the problem, but something has shifted. That's a therapeutic release. Okay? Does that make more sense? Yeah. For now anyway. Okay? So attention is our fuel. Bypass is our induction, which we're going to jump into our first induction very soon. And we're going to stimulate the unconscious mind to give them a therapeutic response, or to therapize them. It's a horrible joke, but I'm going to use that word. So what I would like to do, now we have a list of the conscious minds, okay? We know we need to get rid of it. What's the unconscious mind all about? In your groups, just write a list. What is the function of the unconscious mind? Why is it so important? What is this unconscious mind or subconscious all about? So in your groups, write down a list of it.